Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Today we are going to talk about OnBase and letting it work for you. So we're going to talk about some automated things you can do, some different things you can do within workflow, stuff to make your life easier that you don't necessarily have to touch every day. Here's a picture of our lovely support team. This is Jennifer Hanquinet, and Josh Garrick is also going to be presenting today for you.
Hi, folks.
Just like our normal webinar options, the audience is muted at this time. There is a chat box so you can enter in any questions or anything you would like to add. And at the end, there's a survey. We use those surveys to plan the next webinar, which will be 2 months from now. So please give us your feedback and ideas for what you want to see so that we can customize the next webinar. All right, on today's agenda, we're going to first talk about Click Once deployment, which some of you might use. It's rather new, a very, very good tool in a lot of situations. Scriptless calculations, so using some different things within workflow to make your life a little easier. The workflow timer service. In newer versions of OnBase, they are going to more core-based, so the timer service is a great option and does a lot of things for you and actually gives you a lot more information than the previous. Scheduled tasks. We're going to talk about several things with scheduled tasks and some troubleshooting that goes with if a scheduled task is not working. We're going to talk about autofill keyword sets and reverse autofill keyword set lookup, which a lot of people don't use and a lot of people don't even know it's available. So it's a good option in a lot of different cases depending on what your users might know in comparison to what they're trying to index. So Click Once deployment. Click Once deployment, I believe, came out in either 9.2 or 10. It is a tool that allows you to create what's called a package on the server, and then that package will either create a URL or a UNC path, and from that UNC path or URL, all you have to do is enter that into somebody's browser, and it will automatically install all the components it needs. Now, it connects to OnBase through the application server, so you'll need to have an application server to use this technology. The first time you install it, there are some prerequisites, especially for the Office products that you need to have installed in order for the package to run. But the most beneficial thing about the Click Once deployment is if for some reason, well, there's a couple things. If for some reason you need to change that package, so say it's Outlook integration and you have it set up so people can see workflow through Outlook, and you've decided you no longer want people to see workflow through Outlook, you can remove that option, and the next time they log into their Outlook, it will go out to the server and verify that they have the newest version, and it will synchronize that version. So they will have the latest version on their machine. The other thing is that so that way it always stays in sync. So in another instance, if you upgrade, so you upgrade on that exact server, you don't have to go and touch every machine for the upgrade. you just create a new upgrade package and tell the package that you want everybody to use that package, and therefore, again, it will sync the next time they log into OnBase. A couple things, just a special notes on this. You do not want to put this on Citrix. If you are using a Citrix environment, you'll want to use the manual installation package to install those. Otherwise, it gets very messy because it will create a URL instance for every user that connects to that Citrix machine. So we definitely don't want to do that. Also, another thing is that an alias can become beneficial in this instance if you're planning to move to new hardware. Because if you don't use it, when you create the application server connection, it asks you to put in the server name. And if you, in that case, use the server name and that server name changes, you have to go out to every workstation and uninstall and reinstall. So, which is no different than you would have to in a regular upgrade, but you can avoid that.
With one exception. The same note sort of applies here that Jen was warning about with the Citrix servers. The way Click Once works is it's going to install a package for each user on each machine. So if I'm on my machine, I open up Outlook, I've got Outlook integration, great, package comes down, in place, and away it goes. If Jen sits down at my computer and opens up Outlook, Outlook integration loads in her profile, and there are 2 copies of the package there. This is why we don't want that on the Citrix server. You don't want 400 copies of a package sitting out there. But what ends up happening is if you don't use an alias, you not only need to install 1 copy of the software per machine, you need to uninstall 1 copy of the software per user on each machine. So we really recommend that alias use.
Especially in environments when you have 5, 6, 7 people on workstation. Yeah. Here's just a list of the different modules that use Click Once, or that can use Click Once. Your app enabler, viewer, and indexing, they are actually 2 different packages, or there's a combined package and there is an individual package. So depending on what you want to do with it, you would install either the combined package or just the individual package if you're just using it for one or the other. There's the Office products, so 2007 or 2010, Outlook, Word, Excel, PowerPoint. Document composition for 2007 and 2010. The Unity client, which is relatively new, that can also be deployed via Click Once, and report services. So these are all work very well with the Click Once deployment. We here use Click Once deployment for all of our applications on the screen. So it works out very handy when you do an upgrade and you don't have to go by and remember what machines you have to touch and what machines you don't, and which machines need what, because it all takes care of it on its own.
Yeah. Consider that, folks, particularly with the Unity client. I mean, heck, how nice would it be for those of you that have been using the thick client after an upgrade to not have to touch any of the user's workstations? So next time they log in, bam, they just get the new version of the Unity client. In and done. Mm-hmm. So now we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to talk about scriptless calculations. Here's what I mean by scriptless calculations. So in the past, if you needed to perform calculations on a document, if you needed to take keyword values, manipulate them, compare, do some sort of modification at all, and then compare them to anything, you're setting up workflow actions, you're creating a VB script, and if you're creating a VB script, heck, is this something that needs to go into the classic client, in the standard thick client, not core based, where you need to worry about, okay, do I have my submain 3.5 entry point? Am I coding this for the core? core-based workflow, web client, Unity client, where I need to get my function main entry point in there. Am I coding it for both? Where, heck, okay, now I need to include both sets of code in the VB script. If you're, for the more recent options, even for, again, just simple calculations, you have the option to create a Unity script, or you can even make a web service call. That's you've got a lot of options, and in some of these cases, it can be an awful lot of work, particularly if all you need to do is convert something to a percentage. Divide by 100 and tell me what this is. Starting with OnBase version 11, you don't need to rely on scripting or web service calls to do this sort of thing anymore. We've now moved into the world of set property to expression. It's a workflow action. Uses the business rules engine, but does not require a business rules engine license. What BRE does for you is lets you, well, frankly, it gives you the ability to calculate, to perform rules based on calculations, return results. It really expands what you can do with workflow and OnBase a fairly great deal. This is sort of the mini version of it. And within the single workflow action, you have the ability to go, I'm going to call something a property percentage, and I want that percentage to be my user acceptance keyword number 105, divided by 100. Great. You can use the same logic you've got, the same shortcuts you can use in other workflow actions and notifications, %K to call keywords, %V to call existing properties, or you can even call it an XPath to get values off of an XML document. And just say, okay, so my property of percentage is going to be user acceptance, %K 000.105.1 divided by 100. Next workflow action, set keyword, and then you're done. The beautiful thing with this is it's not limited to basic math. It's not just plus, minus, multiplication, and division. If you need to pull out the middle 3 characters of some character string, you can do that. If you need to do nested, complicated math in there, you can do that. It supports all of this out of the box with OnBase 11 without requiring any additional licensing. The one thing to note here, this is core only. So those of you that are using the OnBase Classic client in classic mode, the old thick client with classic workflow where it doesn't route through the application server, this is new functionality, and like all of the newer workflow functionality, it's not going to function in that mode. So one more good reason to look towards upgrading to the core if you haven't done so already. Keeping along the workflow vein, moving from calculations, now we're going to take a look at automated processes. Once upon a time, and a lot of you are probably still using them, for running your workflow timers, you could run a classic client with the workflow server switch, set up the timers inside of the client. You could check their status inside of the client, which is great if you can get at it, if you can get in there and see it. A lot of times, the reason I say that is a lot of times we set that up to run as a service, so you don't have to have a client sitting open on the workstation. As long as the service is running, your workflow timers are running. Well, that's great. The problem with it, problems, For starters, well, as I said before, almost all of the new code that has come out since version 8 has been core only. So if you're attempting to use, for example, our set property to expression action we were just looking at with a classic timer, couldn't do it. It'll throw an error. Also, if you were trying to use, say, a Unity script, also not going to work in that mode. The biggest deal, for me anyway, is that the classic workflow timer service, a classic client running as a workflow timer, is a single-threaded application. So it is going to do exactly one thing at a time. Once it starts executing a timer, it is going to finish executing that timer before it starts executing the next timer, even if that timer should have already kicked off. All it does is get queued up to run and then eventually makes its way into the processing cycle. This is especially problematic if you have a single workflow, a single OnBase scheduled service out there that's running all of your scheduled processes, like, say, dip, cold, anything of the sort, and workflow, because at that point, suddenly, if OnBase is in the middle of processing a gigantic dip batch, it's not going to run any of the workflow processes until it's done with dip. Then it'll kick off the rest of the process. What did it look like to set that up in the past? I'm sure you've seen this. If you've got workflow and this with this option, you hop into the client with the workflow server switch. You go to workstation options. You select your server. You add the queues. That's great. Once that's in there, then you can take a look and see, when do my timers execute? If there's anything currently executing, that shows up from the top. Well, wonderful. But again, one thing at a time. Well, now here is the core-based workflow timer service. It's got its own GUI, so you're not doing this from inside of a client. It can support multiple data sources. So let's say that you only have one machine that can really handle your workflow processing. You've got some big processes out there, but you've got both a test and prod system. Great. The workflow timer service can handle both test and prod simultaneously from the single interface. It'll tell you what life cycles you're working with, what queues in the life cycles, what timers in those queues. This is one of the things you didn't get in the classic mode. It would tell you what timers were executing. That's nice. But take a look on our screen here. We've got those last 3 timers are all called hold days. That's swell. So in the classic client, you see hold days, hold days, hold days. You don't know what queue it's in. Well, here you do. It'll tell you the last time it executed. It'll tell you when the next execution is scheduled to run. And if one of these is executing right now, instead of that little yellow dot, it'll be a green dot in front of it to tell you it's actually working. From the administrative side, a beautiful point here is at the bottom of the screen, it will display errors that come up as if you had the diagnostics console open. But instead of catching all of the core-based activity, let's say that you've got this running on your web server, for example, this is just what's happening in workflow. So you can really narrow down the scope of what's happening, where it's happening, and get to the bottom of problems before they really blow up, escalate, and grow out of control. The most important feature with this, well, 2 most important. One, it's core-based, so sure, it's going to be compatible with all of the new actions. And 2, it's multi-threaded. So if you've got 4 timers that are set to execute, great, it'll do them all at the same time if need be. They're not going to get in each other's way. The only thing that's blocking it at that point are resources on the server and locks on the documents. It's got its own version. It's a self-contained copy of the application server. So if you go and add timers or adjust timer logic, you also only need to restart this service for that logic to be in play. You don't need to affect your end users, particularly those of you that are web client users. You don't need to bump the users out just because you wanted to add a new timed process to the system. You restart the timer service and bam, you're good to go.
Well, that is unless you've just created it in config, and in that case, an IIS reset may be necessary because it won't know that it exists.
Well, it depends. Sure.
Yeah.
If you've got actions that are directly affecting the end user, yeah, absolutely. It's just within the timer itself, you're actually good to go.
All right. Well, besides using, you may have used the workflow switch on a scheduled process. There's a lot of other things you can do with scheduled as scheduled processes. So we're going to talk about the scheduled service because it is actually such a great option, although it is single-threaded, for other processes. But they have actually added some functionality to that now so that we can make that more multi-threaded, which I will explain. So any of your import processes could be brought in with a scheduled, with the client running as a service. You can sweep scan queues. You can just scan from disk. You can schedule commit. We can schedule autofill keyword sets that we want, like say the file comes out at 10 o'clock at night. We can schedule this to run at 11. Then your users will have all the information they need first thing in the morning. And OCR. So if you're doing big batches of OCR and you don't want that to happen on your servers during the day, you can queue that up for night and have that run while no one is on the system, taking less of your resources. The switches when running the client as a service. So you always want to add, you're going to need to add some switches in order for the client to run, and these switches are all dependent on what you're trying to do. The ODBC switch, to point to the correct ODBC source that you have configured on the server, and the scheduled switch. Now, the scheduled switch allows anything that is put into the scheduler to run. They've added a new one now, which is called scheduled instance, which allows you to add instances and schedule stuff to a certain instance. So you could have for example, you could have a service that you just run all your cold and dip on, and then say you have a service, or you have a service that you run everything on except your OCR, and you want your OCR to run on its own service because it's very time consuming and it has a lot of things to do. So you can set that up to be its own service. So now you have two clients running as a service, which is multi-threaded, and then use this switch to help you know what instance it's going to be. And then I will show you also in the scheduler where you set that up. And then as Josh was just talking about the workflow server switch for anybody using classic workflow types. This is what the screen looks like. Now I'm going to do a little bit of a demo here in a little while. I'll give you a little bit more information, but basically we just pointed to the location of the client on the machine. We'll want to give it a username and a password. Here's the ODBC switch pointing to a, looks like a dev environment in this case, and then the scheduled switch, so it will run anything that is sitting in the scheduler. Now, service logon setting will give you, if you want to have that service to run as a domain account, you can add that in there. And then there's also service dependencies. Now, in most cases, those are automatic that come up when you create the service, and you don't generally need to do anything with them. But in the case of using multi-instances of scheduler, you may have to make some changes to the dependencies because Net Framework doesn't always know what to do when it tries to start up 2 of them at the same time. So I'll explain a little further when I get to the demo. Here's that schedule window that I was talking about, where you schedule any of your processes. In this case, we've got two scan queue sweeps. Here's the workstation that they're assigned to, and this is where you can specify the instance you want. So if you have multiple instances set up, you can click here and select the instance that you want this process to run under. Troubleshooting a service. So in a lot of cases, we have services running out there. A lot of people have service or client running as a service. And something will happen, and all of a sudden our DIP processes are not coming in, or our automatic commits are not happening, or our scheduled commits are not happening, or OCR is not running. What do I do? Well, first of all, we want to check that the service has been started. Sometimes if you have Windows updates happen on your server, maybe the service didn't start up properly after it rebooted overnight. Did we make configuration changes? Did we, add a new DIP process? Well, if we added a new DIP process and scheduled that DIP process, we need to restart the service, or the service isn't going to know that it exists. If you are trying to run a DIP process or a cold process or any of those things, is that workstation that you're trying to run it from, is it registered for those products? Because if it is not, therefore, it will not run. And then, how do I know whether it is actually processing anything? Well, there's a nice little tool called OBServMon that is wonderful for helping you in this situation. So it allows you to monitor a service, a client running as a service, and it will show you what it's trying to do. So if it's trying to sweep this directory, it'll say, well, I didn't find any files. Well, if you know that's not the case, then we need to look. Then you need to look further as to maybe it's something to do with rights, or maybe rights changed, or something of that nature. Or I've seen it where I've gotten an error that said that it couldn't connect at all, right in that OBServMon, and it ended up being that the ODBC connection in the service was not spelled correctly, so it didn't know how to connect to the ODBC connection. So it has a lot of neat features. It's a tool that I use quite a bit when people, especially if people call. So I'm just going to show you a little bit about it so you can kind of see what it's all about, and we can get it to you if you decide that that's something you'd be interested in. Yep.
So, and specifically, we'll yeah, there's a demo coming up.
Yes.
So we've gone from using services to manage your work for you. Now we're going to look at a couple of options that your users can use, and that you as administrators can use to help your users in the form of autofill keyword sets. I know a number of you are already using autofills. The nutshell version is the user needs to enter exactly one keyword value, PO number, for example. And based on that PO number, OnBase will fill in all of the rest of the keywords on the document so that your users don't have to. It's a huge time saver. It's also frankly great for great for accuracy. You don't need to worry that your users are typoing someone's name every time they enter it. No, because it's pulling that right out of a database table somewhere. There are two varieties of autofills, internal and external. The internal autofill just comes from an OnBase table. You run some sort of import process or used an existing import process to populate a keyword table in OnBase, a data set table in OnBase. And so all the information is contained within your current system. That's great unless you've got data that's changing rapidly in some third-party system. You can't really be going through and doing an update to your keyword tables multiple times a day, running process after process after process. That's time consuming, that's processor consuming. That's a lot of work and a lot of things that can break. So to address those situations, we've got external data sources where the system, instead of looking to an OnBase table, end around the whole process. It just goes out to your line of business app, hits a database table there, tables, views, whatever you've got set up. It's all based off a SQL query or a VB script, and just retrieves the data straight from there. So it doesn't actually populate the tables in OnBase because it doesn't need to. That information is all stored in the third-party app, right in your line of business. It'll use what it has. To your end users, there's really no difference. They enter the PO number, whether that PO number is saved in an OnBase table or saved in some external system. System behaves the same way. They enter in the PO number, then bam, the rest of the keywords populate.
The one thing to keep in mind, if you are using an external data set, and you are using SIC clients, your users, you will need to have that data source created, your ODBC connection to that data source created on each individual machine.
Good point.
If they are using the web, all you have to do is create that on the web server, and then it will use it from there. So,
yep. Now, a little trick that we've pulled with external data sets that some of you might find a use for. As Jen just said, usually you need to set up a new data source out to this third-party system. We've actually seen a fair amount of mileage by linking an external data source right back into OnBase. Let's say you have an autofill set that has both a PO number and an invoice number in it. Rather than populating that table twice, once where PO number is the primary key and once where invoice number is the primary key, that being the value that the users will enter to kick things off. Heck, no. You populate that table one time, you run one import process, and we set up an external data set that goes up and just reads the table in a different order. So when your users are populating a PO, great. They enter the PO number, populates everything they need. When they're indexing an invoice, they've got the invoice number in front of them. They hit that, it hits the same table in OnBase, but in a different order, and fills in all of the data for them there. Which flows nicely into reverse autofill keyword set lookups. It is the exact same sort of logic behind what I just explained with using an external linking back into OnBase, but built into the system in sort of accessed via a different way. Those of you that have used reverse key set lookups, well, heck, let me back up a step. What is a reverse autofill keyword set lookup? If you don't know the primary key, let's go back to PO number. If you don't know the purchase order number, but your invoices need to be indexed off of it, because that's the primary key of your autofill, but there isn't a PO number on your invoice. What do you do? Historically, if you were scanning these documents, you could configure what's called a reverse autofill, where another button would show up in the scan queues that would allow you to input any of the keywords in an internal autofill set to look that up. You'd be presented with choices. Highland eventually realized that this is downright useful to have and has, expanded the functionality so that you can get at this now really anywhere in the thick client where you are indexing or re-indexing a document. So file import, re-index, re-indexing workflow, indexing through scanning. It's present in all of these interfaces. When we're setting it up, what you're seeing on the screen here now, there we go. We go in, we tell the system, great, I am going to be working with my AP purchase order information keyword set. That's based off of my PO number and populates things like the vendor number, the vendor name, invoice number, invoice amount, it's all there. We say what we're going to call our reverse lookup with the item label. So that's what the users end up seeing. The dialog title is just what comes up when they actually do the search. The primary select is the button, the label, where they press to say, this is the value I want. And the help text down there is just what shows up if the users need help. There are all sorts of options for this. I could go on at great length about reverse key set lookups and everything you can do with them. We'll do a little demo where we build one later. But if you want all the fine details, we will be more than happy to provide. Just to show off what it ends up looking like, here I am in the import dialog, and I've said, hey, I'm importing a vendor invoice. Normally, I would enter the PO number here, but I don't have the PO number. You'll notice, and this is going to be new to most of you, there is a lookup option that appears right above the keywords. If you click that, the purchase order lookup comes up. This is what we just configured. And the users are able to input any of the values, keyword values, except the PO number because they've already indicated they don't know that one. So we're saying, hey, I know this is for invoice number 1110. System goes, pulls that up and says, here we go. Here's the information I have for 1110. Is this correct? You go, yeah, this is it. This is what I want. You select that, hit the index button, and then boom, it goes and populates the rest of that information for you just as if the user had entered PO number 656 into the system.
That's some nice technology. Yeah. A lot easier than having to try to find it. All right, so now we're going to start a demo.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, we have a question here about reverse autofill key sets. Do reverse autofill keyword sets work with external autofill? No, they don't. The reverse autofills are currently only work with internal data sets, and currently are only available in the thick client. I know that Highland is going to be expanding their use into the Unity client. To what degree, I don't know. And I do not know if there is any intention to try and let it work from an external. Just based on how the externals are calling data outside of OnBase, I don't know how practical that is. I don't know what sort of code goes into that. But what the heck? I'll check. And if Highland comes back and says, yep, we're absolutely looking to include that, I'll be certain to let you know. We'll post something up to the blog.
All right. So we're going to get started with the demo, and I think we're going to lead right into autofill since we were just talking about it.
Yeah, kind of working backwards here. So first off, just mentioning from before, our internal and external autofills. So here we are in configuration, and here I am looking at my purchase order information autofill keyword set. This is configured to pull my PO number, my date, my amount, vendor number, vendor name, and invoice number. All of this exists inside of a table inside of OnBase. To that end, let me just check to make sure that this is set the way I think it is. Invoice is currently set for a purchase order number. Great. So let's say that I'm coming in here, I take my vendor invoice, 656, tab, and then bam, up comes my vendor number, vendor name, invoice number, all right there. Those of you that have used autofill, it's not too exciting. Those of you that are new to the concept, again, a huge time saver. But not ready for you yet. Let's say, again, we're in a situation where we don't have the PO number. Now, again, I've just said you certainly have the option to set up a reverse autofill, and we'll do that. But I'm also going to look at the possibility of setting up an external data set. Now, you'll notice when I select our invoice external autofill keyword set, another button over here becomes available to us. Aside from keyword settings and user group, the external button is here. On an internal data set, that's grayed out. One of the easy ways to know if you're looking at an external is that button available to you? When we click on that, we see simply just a SQL select statement. That's really all this is we're telling the system, hey, when you connect to this other database through this data source, right in the middle of the screen, run this query, pull this information, and by the way, for my autofill purposes, this one column, key KS114 in this case, is my primary key for my autofill. That is what people are going to key off of to populate the data, to trigger the whole set. This is one of the cases where I'm actually connecting right back into my OnBase system, connecting straight into my purchase order information autofill set, and just pulling the information back in a different order. So, for testing purposes, invoice number 110, there's my PO number, amount. I don't even remember what 142 was set to, and vendor number and vendor name. Which you can check right here to see what the options are. That could, again, you could be connecting to OnBase, you could be connecting to anything where you can set up a data source to that database and do a retrieval, do a query to it. I've seen people set up some very complicated views so that we can get at the information we need. You also have the option here, instead of a SQL select string, to create a VB script that will do pretty much the same thing. Just allows for some extra customization if you need it. But let's say that in this case, we're not having to pull from an external system. You're pulling from OnBase itself. Well, you're not going to go and set up an external database, an external retrieval back to an OnBase table for the off chance that a user that should know some information doesn't. That a piece of, that a document you're indexing, that a document you've scanned doesn't have a PO number on it. 99.99% of them do, but what about that? Those lingering few. You don't want to let them sit. You want to give your users an option. That option is our reverse autofill set. And so we say, okay, this is for when the users get in and they're working with our purchase orders, and we're going to give them the ability to do a purchase order lookup. Not going to bother with help text right now. If the users had started indexing the document and those keywords are part of the autofill set, we want to make sure that the ones in the autofill set take precedence. So we are going to replace what the users have already entered. And we're going to prevent the users from going ahead and doing anything more to those keywords. Whatever this is pulling out of the autofill table wins. When I go to add it, we have the option to list any of the keywords associated with that purchase order information autofill set as search keywords. We have the option to customize the results. Do we want these to show up in the results list? Do we want to set the column width? And then name search involves some of the more advanced settings with that. I'm going to go ahead and just select the defaults. Yep, go ahead and set the indices. Wonderful. So I've got that in place. I relaunch my client. And now I go to import an invoice. And here's my lookup option. Again, let's say I don't know the PO number. That 656 I entered earlier, gone from my head, and it's not on the document. So I say, I need to do a PO lookup. And I happen to know that this is invoice number 1110. Oh, there it is. There's only one hit in my table for that. Wonderful. Let's use that. Double click or click on it and hit the index button. They both work. And we see, boom, it goes ahead. It goes ahead and fills in the autofill information just as we'd expect, just as if the user had put in the PO number for you. A great tool, easy to configure, shows up everywhere, and it's part of the system you have right now. It's base functionality. So I encourage you to take a look.
Well, thank you, Josh. I'm now going to talk a little bit about the Windows services and scheduling, and then show you a couple things for troubleshooting. We've had something happen around here quite a bit in the last couple weeks, so I thought it'd be a nice thing to kind of show you, to show everyone if they run into this situation. So you can either set it up, running the client from a service can be configured from the FIT client or from the configuration module. If you go under Utilities, Windows Services, it can be set up here, or under Configuration, under Utilities, Windows Services, it can be set up here. So we're just going to call this the scheduler. Put OnBase in front of it so you have some idea in your services list where you're looking when you want to look for that service. So as I mentioned before, we'll want to grab the path to where our OnBase client resides. In this case, we will just run it as manager. Now we're going to add the ODBC connection here. and then the schedule switch. All right, pretty basic. This is where you would add if you want to use a different account. Lots of people use domain accounts to run their services, depending on where the documents reside. Maybe they're not on this server. Maybe the dips you're running from are on a different server, and so you need to have a different account to access those. You can add the accounts here, and then here's the service dependencies. Now, these are set up automatically. They're the ones that OnBase needs. But like I mentioned before, if you are doing several of these processes running, like one running dip and one running cold, you'll need to create a dependency that says that cold will not start up until dip is started up, or so they cannot try to start all at the same time and start in succession. So if you need any help with that, or if you decide to use this technology, we can help you with that. You can call support. There is also a blog article out there that also talks about using the scheduled instance. So, all right, so we've created the service. Now if we I don't know if it's going to take me there or not. Maybe not. Okay.
Our mouse is a little click happy.
Yeah.
Oh,
All right.
With the new format?
Yeah.
Right click on that. Okay, why isn't that showing up? Oh, because that wasn't that. Yes.
There we go. So used to looking at new servers these days. Sorry about that. No, this just comes up. Come on. All right, so down here, we look at our services. We'll go to OnBase, and it comes in automatic, but it will not be started until we actually physically start it. So we'll go ahead and start the service. So now it is running. Now we'll have to see what is actually scheduled to run. So if we go out here and we go to Processing, Scheduler, Management, we can see that we have two sweep processes in here. But that are scheduled to run. But as you can see, and this is part of the troubleshooting that I'm going to get into here, you can see that these are unknown workstations. So what has been happening is, okay, say we'll just apply these. So you come in here and these say, they both say Windows 7. But as you can see in my list, I have two Windows 7. So first of all, why do I have two processing workstations? And secondly, how do I know which one is the right one to be processing my documents? Well, if we go out here and we look at our registered workstation registration, you can see that we have two Windows 7 workstations registered. You can see one's last login was back in February, and the other one's last login is today. So obviously this first one is the newest one. So something must have happened. Move of a server could be, there could be a lot of different instances that could cause this. Maybe a glitch in the system, maybe network issues while it was connected. But it lost its connection on the 23rd, and it created a new one in the database. Well, this database entry has all of these modules registered to it. So if you have a process out there that is trying to do PDF input filter and cold, if this one is assigned to it, because that is the recent, or that's the newest one, it is not going to run. So what we need to do, or what needs to be done, is that these products then need to be added over to this server, so revoked from here, and then added over here. And once they've been added to here, you want to go ahead and delete that, that workstation. Because you really don't want two of them if you are trying to make sure you have the right one in the scheduled process. Now, for this instance, I'm just going to go ahead and delete this one. You can delete it with these products registered. It's not going to hurt anything. It will release them in the database. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete this. So now we just have the one entry. And then I'm just going to go ahead and register cold. So now if we go back into the scheduler, we got lucky and picked the right one because obviously these now say Windows 7. If we deleted it and we did not pick the right one, or the right one was not here, it would say that unknown workstation that we saw before, and these would all have to be reassigned. So once they are reassigned, then you will, it's always good practice to restart your service, and then everything should run as it was before.
So the question kind of comes in, how can that happen? Just a real quick aside, because again, we've seen this a number of times. Yeah, some sort of network event, replacing of a network card, migrating to a different virtual workstation, that sort of thing, which is almost certainly why Jen had two instances here. This is a VM demo. Will cause OnBase to go, you know, the workstation ID hash that I've created for this has changed. This is a new box. It has the same name, but everything on the back end that goes into identifying a workstation has said, hey, I'm new. This is something different. And so OnBase puts in a completely new instance for you, which is great. That's what it's supposed to do. But you run into a situation like we just saw here, where now you've got two boxes out there with the exact same name. And when you look in your scheduler, if you only look in your schedule management, you're going to, as far as you can tell, this should be working just fine. You know, I'm still on my box called Windows 7. I'm still on my OV server, OnBase server box. Why aren't these running? It's not until you actually hop into that workstation registration window to take a look and say, oh my goodness, I've got 2, 3, 4 instances of this workstation or server out there. Let's clean these up. That you can really get to the bottom of that. It's a great spot to check if you see some kind of odd behavior with scheduled processes not running.
Okay, and then I'm just going to quickly show you this OV service mod. So it's basically just a small executable. You can keep it running all the time. You don't need to keep it running all the time if you don't want to. It does keep, I believe it's 100 meg of data back. I believe that's what it is. So if you're running a lot of processes, like every 5 minutes or every 10 minutes, you might not get the information you're looking for, and maybe keeping it, you know, just turning it on might not help you. But in a lot of cases, if you're not running a lot of scheduled processes, when you turn it on, you should see a backlog that goes back and gives you some information. Now, it's going to show you what services it can monitor. This is our OnBase scheduler that we just created, and then we just click Monitor Service. Now, we don't have a lot going on, so well, let's go into that scheduler and let's click Run Now and see if we can see. So in this case, it ran very quickly because there isn't much going on the system. But so it's using a template called Weekend. It's attempting to perform the sweep of the scan queue, and it was unable to because the workstation is not properly linked. because I'm not licensed for production document imaging, which I would need to be licensed for in order for that to work, in order for suites to work. So if we go out here and let's register our workstation for production document imaging. And then let's restart the service. And now, if we go back into the scheduler and we say run now, that was the last one. It might take a minute. So this tool is so nice because, as you can see, it basically told us what the problem was, or why it could not perform what it needed to perform. So this tool is wonderful because in a lot of cases you have no idea what your service is doing. And this gives you eyes to see what it's doing, like the polling window did when you had the scheduled switch on the FIT client versus running in here. So this might take a little while, so we'll just go on to the next thing here. All right, our online resources. We have our Naviant Cafe, which has lots and lots of people subscribing now, and we are adding data to it weekly. So you might want to check that out for some interesting articles for OnBase and for just basic IT type stuff. And then also there's the Highland community. They have added a lot to their environment, and that community site has a lot of forums and a lot of places where you can add information, or you can see what people have asked and see if any of that has anything to do with you, and you can ask your own questions. So question and answer here. We've got another question. Okay, what if the drop-down for services to monitor is empty? If that comes up empty, then it doesn't think that there's an OnBase service out there on that workstation. If that is the case, and you actually do have an OnBase workstation or an OnBase service on that workstation, we'll probably have to do some research into why that would be. Because usually, the only reason that would be blank is if there is no OnBase service.
Keyed with the sketch switch.
Yeah, keyed with the sketch switch to monitor. So our current versions right now, OnBase 11 Service Pack 2 is out. 12 is supposed to be out sometime this summer. We do not have a date yet. So as soon as we have a date, we will fill everyone in on that.
It's coming.
Yeah, we're hoping it's out before our next webinar because we like to do what's new in 12 in our next webinar, but we haven't gotten a date on that yet.
So no promises.
Yeah. Colfax Capture 10, we've got VRS Elite. They've now put a service pack out for that, and then the Teleform 10.5. If you think of any questions after this webinar, please feel free to either call us on our 1-800 number or contact us on our email at support@naviant-inc.com. We also are doing live chat now, so if you go out to our website and click on the customer portal, You can do live chat, so you can chat with any one of us. Which is a great way to get a quick question answered if you have just a quick question. Our next webinar, as I mentioned, will be July 19th. We do not have a topic yet, so please fill out your surveys or send topic. If you have topics that you would like to be presented, send those to our support box so that we can try to include those. And then the next Naviant conference will be October 22nd and 23rd. And again this year, it will be in the Wisconsin Dells.
Your feedback is important to us, folks, and as always, very much appreciated. So we look forward to hearing back from you and knowing what it is you'd like to see from us.
Yes, exactly. So here is our support information again, same as I just mentioned. So feel free, if you have anything from this webinar or anything else, please feel free to let us know. Thanks a lot, and have a very wonderful day.
Been great talking to you, folks.